weeks. Is that all it's been? I guess Monday will be 3 weeks since this rotten fucking Donald Trump, this rapist, took over the government of the United States with the assistance of a bunch of weak-kneed, sob-sistering fucking Republicans in the House and the Senate, who, when Trump says jump, they say, yes, boss, and try to fly. 2 weeks after the orange bastards freeze on foreign aid, HIV groups abroad have not received any funding. HIV groups, organizations of civilians and doctors who struggle. There is no cure for HIV. There are medications right now that suppress that virus, but it stays inside a person, and it takes medication to keep it from becoming transmissible or from killing the person who's still carrying the virus. So the health of more than 20 million people globally, including 500,000 children, the health of 20 million people is now in jeopardy. These are people who rely on medication and treatment and assistance from health officials through USAID and foreign aid to protect them, to keep them alive. So there have been some waivers now from the State Department. Who's that, Marco Rubio? Some waivers issued by the State Department clarifying that the work to protect the lives of these 20 million people dealing with HIV/AIDS, well, the work can continue, but the funds to do so are gone. They're missing. So what? The good fairy is supposed to bring the funds? Maybe Jesus fucking Christ is supposed to come down from heaven and deliver? Or Donald fucking Trump is supposed to rise up out of hell and deliver? The Christian churches? Where are the funds coming from? Well, to look at the dark side, with the closure of USAID and the recall of that organization of officers posted abroad, they were given 24 hours. 500 or 600 aid officers employed by the government of the United States were sent a notice: get your fucking ass back to the U.S. Be on the next C-130. It's leaving, blah, 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 blah. Just immediately. This is how a dictatorship works. So, with the closing of USAID and the recall of officers who have been posted around the country, around the globe, to assist with what USAID does, well, given that, there's little hope that the situation is going to resolve quickly or at all. Now, you've heard of PEPFAR. PEPFAR. They were talking about it on Morning Joe this morning. Chris Matthews was brought back from the grave and was talking about it. But HIV treatment and services are funded through this thing called the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, the acronym being PEPFAR. That's a $7.5 billion program that, along with all foreign aid, on the Orange Filth's first day in office, that program was frozen. I mean, what kind of a dirty, rotten son of a bitch would do something like that? Well, Donald Trump, this orange-faced ape, this fucking rapist and criminal and convicted felon, he would. He did. Now, when did PEPFAR start? Well, it started in the Bush administration, GW, 2003. And that organization has delivered life-saving treatment to as many as 25 million people in 54 countries and has gotten bipartisan support ever since it was first put together. Now, let us not adopt too much of a Pollyannish attitude here. The bipartisan support from the Republican side, the Christian fascist side, was not out of a humanitarian effort to save people's lives and to ease their suffering, but it was to keep HIV/AIDS as much as possible away from the precious white people in the United States. Come on, you think I'm being a cynic? No, I'm not. Go to your local church and listen. Listen to what the minister, well, maybe not your local church, but especially these big mega fucking sewers of 20,000 people go to listen to Reverend Asshole. Go listen or ask the guy about, and all these Christians know that the only people who get AIDS are queers. And that's only because they, do it in a way that shouldn't be done. So ask these megachurch ministers their attitude about AIDS or gay folk. You remember when the AIDS epidemic first just exploded in this country, and Falwell and Pat Robertson, the rest of these evangelical Christian scum, said it was God's revenge, God's punishment. Amen. To the goddamn queers. This is what you get. You remember that? All right, maybe you were around in the early 80s when this horror exploded. I was. I watched the AIDS epidemic go through Atlanta like what it was. Hooded death. With a scythe that just cut down so many creative people here in Atlanta, black and white. Midtown Atlanta. That was the area of choice for so many gay people, gay couples. It was a center for art and entertainment and dance and comedy and theater. And when the AIDS epidemic, the first wave, passed through here, hundreds of young men died. And Reagan couldn't even say the fucking word. I digress. The reason I digress is because I was witness to that. I saw it. Like so many people in this country. If you lived in a city that had a big gay population, like Atlanta, like San Francisco, like LA, like New York, like Chicago, wherever, and if you were observing, if you were paying attention in the early 80s when this hit, the AIDS epidemic, and how gay folk were just fucking demonized, treated like shit. And what they were accused of. And if you saw your friends die and listened to how your dead friends, even after they were dead, were being demonized by these fucking Christians. The Jews weren't doing it. Fuck the Muslims. Here in Atlanta, no contact between me and the Muslim population in the early 80s. But I had a lot of contact with the Christians and the Jews. And the Jews didn't do it. It was the Christians who made being gay even worse than they had already made it. See, God is going to punish you, you goddamn sodomite. Wow. So without the treatment that PEPFAR provides, that has now been defunded, millions of people with HIV are now at risk of severe illness and death. But when it's sub-Saharan Africa, do you think Elon Musk must revel in that? Yeah, kill him. Kill those black devils. Think I'm being extreme? Get fucking real. Take a look at Elon Musk's history. And as far as Trump doesn't give a shit about anybody or anything other than his bloated self. So the loss of treatment now with the defunding of PEPFAR threatens to reverse the progress that has been made against AIDS in HIV, I should say, in the past 40 years. Yeah, that's how long it's been around, recognizable. 40 fucking years. And this progress, most of the progress has been made in recent years, I don't know what, 10, 12 years, and cutting off the funding for PEPFAR could very easily cause the emergence of drug-resistant strains of HIV. And that outcome would have a global impact, including here in Christian Nazi paradise. So, a deputy director of UN AIDS, that is the UN, the United Nations HIV division, she said the pause on aid and the stripping down of USAID, what that has delivered in terms of no funding, no drugs, no medical care, she said it delivered what she called a, quote, system shock. A system shock. This is what this filthy son of a bitch Trump and his goddamn Nazi ape have done, among other things. Ms. Stegling added, quote, now you need to see how you can work with the system as it is to make sure that what is theoretically possible will actually happen, end quote. In other words, to continue to struggle, even though the white Nazis in this country, in the United States, who now control this unbelievable and unbridled power, are taking actions, plural, that are going to result in the deaths of millions of people around the planet. But they don't give a fuck. Oh, well, Donald Trump is going to build a beautiful, nice resort in Gaza. And, they got to clear Gaza out. I don't know what they're going to do with all the bodies. They're going to find an awful lot of little kid bodies, little children, missing arms, legs, and heads. Fuck them, give them to Egypt. So, about a week ago, 10 days ago, our new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, issued a waiver of life-saving medicines and medical services, which in theory allowed for the distribution of HIV medicines. But the waiver did not name PEPFAR, which left organizations that count on PEPFAR for their funding not knowing what the fuck to do. Where do they go? Who do they turn to? And on Sunday, just passed, another State Department waiver said more explicitly that it would cover HIV testing and treatment, as well as prevention and treatment of opportunistic infections like tuberculosis. That's according to a memo that the New York Times took a look at. Yeah, the memo did not include, however, HIV prevention or support for orphaned and vulnerable children. What is it with these fucking Nazis that they kill children, whether it's Hitler or Netanyahu or this goddamn leaping frog from South Africa? Children. Ah, you dirty bastards. I swear to God. So, the memo from the State Department did not include HIV prevention. Oh, they did make an exception for pregnant and breastfeeding women. No HIV prevention funding, and no funding for support for orphaned kids who have watched both parents die a fucking hideous death. Have you watched people with AIDS, HIV/AIDS, die? Have you? Especially the ones whose lungs fill up with fluid? I wonder if Marco Rubio or Donald Trump or the jumping jack Nazi from South Africa has ever stood outside a dying friend's hospital room, stood in the hallway because they couldn't stand it anymore, listening to the person try to breathe, and it sounds like they're blowing fucking bubbles 3 feet underwater, and then it stops. I don't think so. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.